Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the MetaStellar YouTube channel. My name is Maria KOROLOV. I'm the editor here at MetaStellar. And today I have a new dog. And her name is Rigel, like literally Rigel, the brightest star in the Orion of, somebody help me out. Constellation, thank you. I did not give her the name. That was the name she came with. But, Rigel, how do you shorten that? Gel? So I'm calling her Jelly for short. Yes, I am. She just had a bath, so now she smells nice. And of course, the first thing she did was roll around in the dirt. Didn't you? Didn't you? I don't know if you can see this, but no, you can't. Oh, well. Okay, so, yes, we've got a bunch of free books for you today, like we always do. These are all bestsellers. Amazon has a list of bestsellers, science fiction and fantasy bestsellers that are free. The link to that in the description box below. We have some fantasy books, we've got a space opera, and we've got a story of EMP apocalypse. And today we were helped out by a whole bunch of people. Lilibet Dominguez-Torres, Peter Cooper Hay, both of them are community members, Regina CLARKE, and E.S. Foster, and Regina and Emma are both here with us today. Hey, Emma. Hey, Regina.
Hey.
Emma is our anthology editor, and our anthology is out, and you can buy it. All right. Let's get into the books. We're going to start with book number 5, and I'm going to make that big on the screen for you so you can see the cover. Here it is. Oh, let me zoom in a little bit so you can take a closer look. Here we go. All right, this is One Spark Away, a standalone novel of EMP survival. EMP is electromagnetic pulse, and an EMP destroys electronics, but not people or plants or animals. So just electronics. It's a hugely popular genre of books. We seem to have one of these books on our list every other week. And this is by Mason Dean. He's new to our Free Fridays. But this type of book is very popular, and there's a lot of them. And Regina read the beginning of this for us, because that's what we do. We read the first few chapters of the books, and then we'll let you know what we think, and if it's the kind of book we would continue reading. So, Regina, what did you think of this book?
This book was literally published 3 days ago, and the description blurb is very short, so I began reading it without a very clear idea of plot or purpose. The story opens at a bar where military personnel are taking a much-needed respite from thinking about whatever they've been doing or whatever they're about to do. Right away, we get introduced to the medic Ashley, who's sitting with her back to the wall, scanning the room. The others in the bar are on the rowdy side, swapping stories about deployment and impossible commanders, but she's keeping her distance. It was this aspect that drew me in, because it conveyed mystery and uncertainty, at least about her role. She's been in the service for 10 years and presumably is about to quit. Call it quits. Ashley goes into the bar washroom and shuts herself in a stall to gain momentum and a moment of silence, and to be free from the crowd. But she is frozen in place when 2 female officers come in and begin talking about the sightings and reports of drones all across the planet that higher-ups are ignoring in spite of radar evidence. Ashley is appalled at the silence from the chain of command. So far, it sounds to me like a familiar scenario in so many books about the potential of the end of the world, namely that the underlings know what's happening and their leaders are pretending ignorance, and this is all at the expense of the planet's survival. The next chapter begins with Ashley walking late at night away from the bar towards her hotel. It's a good setup because you know something's going to happen before she reaches it, and something does. She sees lights in the sky, and they have a pattern. She's trained to look for patterns in everything. It's second nature for her. This time, though, she assumes it's the drink she's had at the bar and goes into her room at the hotel, deciding the array of lights she saw as some atmospheric trick. Just as her unease starts to dissolve, her phone lights up with a dozen messages from Brent, whose recent marriage proposal she refused. She doesn't answer. In the morning, she calls her mother and plans to return home to the family farm and her parents and old friends, leaving her service days behind. Only she makes the mistake of stopping at a cafe to say goodbye to a military pal and realizes both of them are targets of a car barreling down the middle of the road. I stopped reading here at that point. I didn't peek ahead because I didn't want to spoil the plot for myself. I wanted to experience it as it unfolded. Ashley is already a likely leader in the making, it seems to me, not to be underestimated. This book is well written. It really held my attention, which I didn't expect to happen at all. Maybe it'll turn out to be an everyday humdrum, predictable, apocalyptic disaster story. But then again, I have to say, I rather think it'll keep surprising me. I recommend it, yes.
All right. Yeah, thanks for taking that on. We usually have Alex reading these because he's a big fan of the EMP novels. He must have read what, like 100 of them for us. So it seems like a much gentler beginning than they normally have. Often what happens is people's phones die and a guy says, "It's an EMP attack. I knew it." Pulls out a gun and starts shooting everybody before they kill him. Like this macho kind of fantasy. And this one seems like it has a very different tone. So
yeah, when it started, I was going to put it down because it was slow moving. But Ashley, the character of Ashley, really is compelling. And that's what kept me in those slow moving chapters.
All right. Next, we have something very, very different, which is often what happens on these Free Fridays. Let me make that a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see this cover. This is Cruel Magic by Eva Chase, the first of 8 books in the Royals of Villain Academy, a paranormal academy series. The other books are $5 each, and they are in Kindle Unlimited. And Kindle Unlimited is where you pay $12 a month and you read all the books you want, as long as you don't mind being part of the whole, evil Amazon Empire thing. Which, I mean, it's $12 a month for all the books you can read. I read a lot of books, so yeah. Anyway, Emma read this for us. Emma, what did you think of this book?
So I had to admit that this kind of gripped me from the first chapter, and I was really excited to keep reading it afterwards. The story begins with Rory. She's a 19-year-old college student. She lives in her parents' basement, and she's trying to make a living as an artist. Like, she makes these figurines, and she's already got a bunch of money saved up, and she's convinced that she has enough to cover her rent, and she can move out on her own into a studio apartment. And it all sounds incredibly far-fetched and impossible, and I can't even imagine. But apparently in this world, the fantasy still runs in where you can do that sort of thing. That's why it's a fantasy. But one morning, she spends time with her parents, and she's trying to convince them that she has money to save, and she can live on her own, and she doesn't want to be constantly stalked by her parents. She wants her own space. And her parents kind of say that they don't really feel comfortable with the idea of her moving out yet. Rory really wants the freedom, however. And this is where we learn that both of her parents are mages. They are able to manipulate joy to cultivate it in other people and use it to power their magic. So they can do all kinds of things with it. And we also learn that Rory is adopted and she doesn't have any magical ability. So whoever her biological parents were, they didn't pass on any magic traits. Rory goes down to the basement at one point where her room is. And she says hi to her pet mouse. I really like her pet mouse. And suddenly there's a couple of crashes, and it sounds like someone's breaking in. Rory calls 911, but then she runs upstairs because she wants to do something about the situation. When she gets up there, she finds 5 people in black uniforms. They're standing around, and they use magic to basically just slash her parents' throats open, and then they knock Rory out and take her away. Rory wakes up in the back of the car. She's unsure why these people have kidnapped her, but she feels something crawling around in her hair, and she realizes that her pet mouse has tagged along for the ride. The mouse starts speaking to her telepathically, and she explains that she's actually familiar. She used to be a mage before she was placed in a mouse's body because she was dying. She explains that The people who kidnapped Rory and killed her parents are mages, but instead of harvesting joy, they actually harvest people's fear. She also explains that they're taking her to an academy where she can harness her powers, because it turns out Rory might actually have magic. She doesn't think she does, but from the books, it's clear that she's probably going to have some. And I stopped reading about here, but I was really excited to get back into the story because I really like the pacing, I like the characters, and I was just generally excited to see what happened next. And Lilibet Dominguez Torres also reviewed this. She said that the first few chapters of the book have a really interesting plot line that introduces us to a world with all of these different mages and where an evil magic school exists. And she says that personally, she won't be continuing with it, but she definitely recommends it if you're looking for something that is urban fantasy and it's full of magic and secrets.
All right, thanks. And the next one also has a bunch of magic in it, and I am going to tell you about it because the guy who read it for us, Peter Cooper Hay, who's also a fantasy writer, by the way, is not here with us today because he had a conflict, but he would have liked to come. So hopefully we'll see him at a future Free Friday. So this is Fire Mage by Trudi Jaye, the first of two books in the Fire Caller Chronicles, a kind of a fantasy series. The books are $5 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. So Peter says that this book seems aimed at young adults, and the story style is uncomplicated, and the action moves along at a steady clip. There are two protagonists, Jenna and Nate, and they're both in their late teens. Jenna cooks and cleans for a powerful 200-year-old mage, and he bought her at a slave market when she was 12, but he never treated her as a slave. And under his guidance, she's learned magic and committed his entire spellbook to memory. Meanwhile, Nate was apprenticed to a group of lava runners, and they invoke demons to help them mine the local volcano for magical salt. And then in opening chapters, both of them have their worlds turned upside down when they and their mentors are attacked by the king's elite soldiers, who are these terrifying beings with glowing red eyes. And we don't know why they were attacked. Maybe there's political schemes are afoot, but we don't know whose. We don't know what they hope to gain. And Peter says this is the start of a really fun adventure story, kind of like a Game of Thrones, but for kids. And he says, while the book is billed as young adult, it might be more appropriate for middle grade readers. So it's a great book to give to a kid who loves swords and magic, but isn't yet ready for gruesome scenes of torture or convoluted dynastic struggles. Okay, so then the next book is something completely different yet again. It's a space opera, Embers of Rebellion by DJ Holmes, and I read this with very high hopes. So this is the first of two books in the Secession War space opera series. The other book isn't out yet. It's scheduled to be released next month, and you can pre-order it, and they're in Kindle Unlimited. But that's not what kind of makes me excited about it. What made me excited is that the author also has another space opera series, 22 books long, called Empire Rising, which has thousands of 5-star reviews, all of which is in Kindle Unlimited. And so, I immediately added it to my to-read list. And the first book of that series, Void War, is also free today. And I grabbed a copy, and I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below. I love series with a lot of books in them because it tells me that people love the series enough and the author loved the series enough to stick with it for a long time. And also, I don't have to learn a bunch of new character names because the same characters kind of pop up book to book. I'm really bad with names, so that's a big plus. So anyway, back to the book of today's list. And I don't usually complain about formatting and typos and stuff like that. But this book's paragraphs were not indented. They were flush left, and there was spacing between the paragraphs. So the book was formatted like an article on the web, not like a print book. And that kind of freaked me out for a few pages while I tried to adjust to it. I got used to it. But that's something that really struck me as weird. And at first I thought, well, the book has only recently been released. Maybe they haven't fixed it yet. And then I went back to that other series and looked at Void War. And that book is also formatted the same way. So that's a choice the author made. So I don't know what's going on with it. Anyway, so I started reading this book, and it opens a couple of hundred years in the future with the general manager of a construction project in space around Alpha Centauri, which is about 4 light years from Earth. And he and his assistant are about to go on a spacewalk to get a close-up view of the progress that's being made. They're building a ship that's going to be faster than the freighters built on Earth and will help the colony stand on its own feet better or get some more independence. And while they're out there on their spacewalk, a bunch of explosions go off, nuclear weapons, ships from Earth have arrived, they blow up the space-based infrastructure, and they pretty much completely destroy the planet underneath this spaceport and kill the civilians, and it's horrible. And he vows revenge because his family's down there. Then we jump to 9 years later, and the same guy is now an admiral, and he is leading a group of battleships to Earth because the other colonies have all gotten together and they've decided to strike back against Earth. They're really mad at this. And they were supposed to only destroy the military installations in space. But after they do that, they also send bombs down to the surface and they kill a bunch of civilians down on Earth. And so that's the prologue to the book. Then we jump ahead by 2,000 years. And I'm like, well, why didn't we just read all this and get invested in those characters and the guy's family and his daughter who survived the attacks? Because it's now like 2,000 years later, and it's all like completely new people. But anyway, so it's 2,000 years later, and we finally meet our main character, Caleb. He's a second lieutenant on a civilian starliner somewhere off in space. He's been serving in the Republic Navy for 6 years. And he's rethinking his career. What is he going to do next? He's got a troubled relationship with his dad. And he's there as a passenger on the ship when they're attacked by pirates. And since he's the only military officer there, and this is a civilian unarmed ship, the pilot, the captain of the ship asks for his help. And he winds up being instrumental in dealing with that pirate attack. And we also find out that there's a political officer on the ship whose job is to make sure that everybody conducts themselves according to regulations. And if they had followed regulations, they would have all been killed, including all the civilian passengers. And so he has to break some of the rules to do this and convinces that this political officer to let him do that because the political officer wants to live as well. And that kind of sets you up for the dynamic that's going to happen later, is that this republic has very strict rules and has political officers everywhere to make sure people are monitoring them, complying with them. And that's going to become important. And the space battle with the pirates is awesome. I really enjoyed it. Really nice job. Space battles can sometimes get boring or too convoluted to follow. This one was really good. It made total sense. Caleb was clever. I really enjoyed it. And I was like really psyched for this book. But then we get into politics and family drama and more drama and a lot of tense moments as he reconnects with his father and his sister. We learned about his dead mother and the political struggles between the colonies and the Republic Center and all this other stuff. And that dragged on for several chapters. And I was not into that. So I prefer my books to start right in the middle of the action without all that preamble. And I also didn't really get attached to Caleb. So as a result, I'm not going to be sticking with the series. Not because there's nothing wrong with it. I don't like the politics and the drama, and the author's writing style didn't click for me. But if it clicks for you, and like thousands of people love it, if it clicks for you, there's a lot more books where this one came from. Not in this particular series, because there are only 2 books in this one, but the other series, like I said, has 22 books in it. All right. Before we go on to book number 1 on today's list, which is a fantasy box set. So you want to stick around for that. I want to thank our Patreon supporters, including our newest supporter, who is, and I can't read her name because it's mirrored. Here we go, WM Frenzel. All right, so thank you, WM. Thank you, Peter and Mariana, and all the people who join us at MetaStellar. Because MetaStellar is run by volunteers, we have like 100 people copy editing and judging and reviewing and working on production and YouTube videos and all this other stuff. And including me and Emma. Emma is, like I said, the anthology editor, and she does other videos as well besides just this series. So all the money that's raised doesn't go to us. All the money raised goes to paying for original fiction by new and emerging authors. Authors like Regina, by the way, she's one of our authors. And it also goes towards all of our publication projects, because we have a whole bunch of books now that you can buy. Now, all this stuff you can read free online on our website. Thanks to our Patreon supporters, all of this actual content is free. The book that we serialized here, Gods and Monsters, free on our website. RENNA'S Crossing, free on our website. And all the stories in our anthologies, free on our website. But you can also buy print and electronic copies of them. I particularly recommend you pick up Gods and Monsters. It is on the Nebula Awards reading list for next year. This is such an awesome book. It is absolutely amazing. Highly recommend. And I'm so thrilled that that was the first book we serialized. It was just awesome. And I have books up on Amazon. They're on the Sci-Fi, humorous Sci-Fi bestseller list. And Regina has books on Amazon. And Emma Foster is a book coach and editor, and you can hire her to help you. And all the links are in the description box down below. So thanks, Emma. Thank you, Regina. And now let's go on to book number 1 on today's list. Oh, yeah, we also have a mug, a new mug. So we have MetaStellar mugs, and, you know, we have like MetaStellar mugs and tote bags. But now we have a Humans Are Magic design from our new artist, Nat Couture. She does a comic series for MetaStellar. And this says Humans Are Magic, because we are, because we're not automated and artificial. We're real. And you can pick that up at our Cafe Press store. Link is in the description box below. All right, let's go on to book number 1 on today's list, which is actually box set number 1. Let me make that bigger for you guys so you can see it. Here we go. And this is the Fae War Chronicles by Jocelyn Fox, and it's a box set of the first 3 books in the 7-book fantasy series, the Fae War Chronicles. The other books are $5 to $7 each, but they're all in Kindle Unlimited. And Emma read this for us. Emma, what did you think of the beginning of this book?
I was a little surprised because I feel like we get a lot of books about fairies and like courts and like romance and romantasy and all those kind of books. But this one, it kind of seemed like it might include something other than the usual tropes. And I was really excited when I started reading it. The book begins with Tess. She's a college student, and she's spending some time with her friend Molly in Texas. So we get some background about how Tess plans to join her brother into the military, and we get to know some of Molly's family members. Tess is feeling kind of homesick. And that night, Tess and Molly prepare to share a room for the night, but before they go to sleep, Tess spots a letter that Molly had received. Molly insists that it's nothing, and she tosses it under the bed. Later that night, Tess has a dream that a small glowing sprite of some kind appears to her and instructs her to get up and look at the letter. And so Tess is like, "Oh, this is all a dream. I don't have to actually do this, but I'm going to do it anyway." So she goes and picks up the letter, and she sees that it's a letter from a fairy court. The letter is ordering Molly to appear at the court by a certain deadline. Otherwise, the knights will come and drag her there. And Tess still thinks she's dreaming, so she just puts the letter back and she goes to sleep. The next morning, Tess and Molly go out for a run, and Tess mentions the dream to Molly, thinking that it was just something weird that happened. She's like, "Oh yeah, I had this weird dream." But however, Molly confronts Tess about reading the letter, and she also explains that the letter was in fact real and that Tess wasn't dreaming. Molly goes into detail about how she had fairy friends as a kid, and she thought they were imaginary friends, but it turns out that they were real. And it's similar to like the little sprite that Tess met in her dream. And not only that, but her real mother had also possibly married a fairy, since her mom and dad are really her aunt and uncle. And Molly has proof because she found a box containing a picture of a woman she didn't recognize and herself as a baby. And apparently, this letter is a summons to appear in the Fae court because Molly is potentially part fairy. And Tess takes all this information in and she's determined to accompany Molly to the court. She says, I'm going to go with you because you're my best friend and I want to make sure you're okay. So this book kind of reminded me a lot of like Holly Black's The Cruel Prince, that series, if you've ever read that. But I really enjoyed the things that set the series apart. I really liked that Tess was like the friend instead of the person who turned out to be part fairy and she's like swept into this fantastical world. And Tess herself is just the friend who is tied to the story because she really wants to help out the person who is actually dealing with all the fantastical stuff. And I also liked how this book seems to be going into more of like the fairy politics, things like that, and possibly a lot of fighting. And I like that more than the romance, so I'm hoping that there's a lot more of that. And I think I might continue reading the series.
All right, so we get some winners today. I want to thank both of you for joining me here today. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Regina. I hope to see both of you tomorrow because we have a Zoom meeting for our Patreon supporters where we talk about writing things and editing things and marketing things and maybe do a little bit of writing too. And we also have a meeting every morning at 7 o'clock, a Zoom, where we just sit and quietly write. And I have been getting so much writing done thanks to Regina. You are awesome because she's there when we get other people dropping in and out too. But Regina has been there every single morning. And for some reason, when somebody's looking at me, I write. And, it's cheaper than going out to a cafe, and spending $20 a pop on Starbucks coffee. And so I love it. Thank you so much, Regina. I highly appreciate it. And I hope you guys both have a great weekend. And for everybody else out there, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Or join our channel. It costs money, but it's only a little bit. And you get to support original fiction by real humans. And, we could all use a little bit more humanity these days. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next Friday. Bye-bye.